that platform of trust for our agent partners. So if you have any questions about this, about your subscriptions and whatnot, I'm probably not the best person. Speak to whoever you've been speaking to at PropertyGuru or iProperty for more information. But the high level is just, it's really, really exciting news. But if you've got any other question, I'll try my best to answer. Feel free to drop them in the comments here, right? So I bring this up not just to say, hey, PropertyGuru is #1, etc., etc. It's probably a bit outdated, right? Because we've got more traffic. But I just wanted to bring this in because these are the sort of things that you probably want to consider, right? How does this sort of data impact you when we're talking about data, right? How does traffic and average visits to websites impact you? So, some of these slides will be made available to you. So I just want to give some context as we go along, right? This 12 million data, I'm going to show you a slide as we go along, and I feel is really, really representative of the market that we are in today, right? But before we get there, let's just talk about data technology, right? So what is it, and what does that mean for the property market or real estate market, right? When people talk about data technology, you hear words like big data, you hear words like, AI, machine learning and all that. Really all of this is centered around how can we interpret or gain insights from very, very large sets of data, right? We are talking about millions and millions of data points. So for us at My Property, our databases, in transactions alone, we look at about 6 million transactions. So really, the question is, how can we get insights, right? And one of the things that we've done is, from all of that, we're able to figure out buyer demographics, right? We're able to figure out whether someone is an investor or whether someone is a first-time buyer, right? Because we're able to match names, right? So basically, just to give you context, that is what data technology is, right? The ability to gain insights from very large chunks of data, right? So that's one, right? The other one, is for us to be able to identify trends really well and all that sort of thing. But what does that really mean for you, right? These are some of the things that we do. So this is the one that I really wanted to point out. This is a chart of our traffic, right? Our monthly unique visitors to propertyguru.com.my. What this chart really shows that, in that red section there was when MCO started, right? MCO first hit, around March 2020, right? And this red section here is when Penjana was announced, right? Right here in June. And what we can see, as soon as Penjana was announced, we started to see this trend up. And as soon as economic sectors started to open up, we saw this, sharp rise, right, in unique visitors to propertyguru.com.my. Now, who is visiting, right? These are most likely, as agents, unless you're visiting to check on, what people are listing and all that, but you would count as one, right? When we talk about unique visitors, this is someone that we haven't seen before, right? That's unique. So in this case, what we saw was this huge spike, right? People are now starting to look for property. They didn't look for property. They started looking for property while they were still stuck at home, right? And then when they could start going out more, you see this huge jump. one of the things that we can glean from this, and we don't really have a lot of data external, right, beyond the website, is one of the hypotheses. And let me know what you think in the chat. I can't really see the chat when I'm sharing my screen this way, but I maybe Kai, if you pick something up, let me know. I'll be very interested, because one of the hypotheses, we've always had when it comes to property, and when we talk about analyzing data, it's all about running hypotheses and testing them, right? Is that real estate is a very personal thing, and we always talk about how, the travel industry, the travel agent was disrupted by the rise of the internet, but it hasn't really affected the real estate agent, right? Why hasn't the internet disrupted the real estate business, right? Why do we see more real estate agents today than we did, every year, right? The reason for that is because of this. One hypothesis for that is how personal real estate is, right? Property is a very large thing. It's quite hard for you to sort of say, I want to pay, a few $100,000 or $1 million, just purely on research. There's a lot of emotions involved, right? Property is a fundamental human need. It is the need for shelter. You do feel that emotional connection with a property. I very recently bought a property. I just, I had my first child during the MCO, and being in the property business and having been an investor for so long, I like to think of myself as a very savvy person, very data driven, my wife as well. But I share you, we saw a house come on the market, and we walked in, right? We walked into this house. First thing, my wife looks, she's holding my 1-year-old girl, and she's like, wow, playroom there. You see, wow. So, from kitchen straight to, wow, this works. I could see the agent smile so big, I think in his mind, I got this fella gonna buy it. True enough, right? I try to play the poker face. I tell the agent, let me think about it. Expensive lah. I give all of that sort of thing. Got back into a car. My wife's like, we have to buy that house. So good. You see the kitchen. Then we put our girl there. Wow. The convincing was done. The agent don't need to say anything. The emotional connection was there. So we did buy the property, right? But I tell this story because to me, that's what real estate is, right? I spent a lot of years studying property. I am a registered valuer in Australia, not in Malaysia. So I was practicing there for about 10 years, right? So I still hold a valuers registration in Australia. And I spend so much time studying this, but yet I still can fall prey to this emotions, right? These emotions when it comes to property, because property is a very, very, by its nature, especially residential, a very emotional thing, because you look at it from the perspective of my family, I'm going to grow up here, I'm going to grow old here, so on and so forth, right? So that's when we talk about residential. And I think, the opportunity to start looking at properties started to really fuel this, right? And you start to see this jump in people starting to do even more research, right? So property is really strong. If we look at where we are, right, early this year, we're still seeing some strong numbers. Now, then we went back into a lockdown, right? But if history is anything to go by, we know that as soon as the borders open, we're able to go outside and go and look at properties, we can expect this jump, right? So the question is, what are we doing, right? Now that we can see this as a trend, how does that relate to us, right? How can I make sense of the chart that I just saw, right? How can I make sense of this, when we're in this phase where people are home, most people are home, and when we eventually, yesterday our Prime Minister mentioned that, when we are likely to open up, right? So, are we are we gearing up ourselves as real estate agents for that moment when people can start coming out and looking at property, right? What do we need to do today to get people ready for that, right? So that's what I want to unpack today. And so please feel free to ask questions. Let's make this as interactive as possible. If there's anything to go by, is how can we uncover these meaningful trends in relation to what you do in as a real estate agent, right?
Hey Joe, would you like me to read out some question for you? You got two now.
Sure, can.
Okay, I read out the first one. Okay, the first one is Dear Joe from Mr. Chia. What extent is analysis of data depends on human intelligence and AI?
What extent human intelligence and AI, right? So at the core of it, it always starts with human intelligence. When we talk about data analytics, right? If you dive deeper, you will always hear this word training the model. You'll always hear this phrase training the model. What does that mean, right? For us as as a data technology company, we build propensity models. We build things that predict value, right? We build things that predict buyer trends. So those are called propensity models. How we train the model to guess or to predict what will happen is based on us feeding as much data as we can into the model, right? So essentially the model will start to see, right, trends. Why, are we able to correlate? And then as data scientists, what we will do is we'll start putting in all these markers, right, to say, okay, all this data that's coming in, these are certain occurrences in the market, right? This is when Penjana happened, right? Let me just use this for a second. This is where Penjana happened, right? This is when iSina was released, for example. This is where, all these milestones, when MCO was lifted, we start to put that in, right? When we start to put in the different variables, right? You can say the more variables you put in, the smarter the model becomes. So when it comes to data analytics, right, it is really a function of how much we put into it, how we train, so the more data that you put into your model, the more, the more insights you can build into it, the better your model becomes.
All right, fantastic. Okay, I'll let you take one more question before you continue. Mr. Zainal is asking, does the investor transaction means bulk buyers like Far Capital?
I suppose so, right? Because they are investors, right? So that's a very interesting question, right? I want to talk about this. What we found in 2020, right? By and large, 82% of the market was made up of investors. Now, how did we derive this, right? We basically looked at all our transactions in 2020. And if let's say, for example, Kai Wong bought a property in 2020, we look through the data and we find, in 2018, Kai bought something, and in 2016, he bought something else again, and so on and so forth, right? We're able to match that and say, okay, Kai is a serial investor. We're able to sort of say, okay, or can we see a trend? Kai is consistently buying more expensive properties, and he'll sell the other, right? Buy more expensive, sell the previous one, and keep moving on from there. From there, we can sort of say, okay, he's an upgrader, for example. But we kind of lump all of this into the investor category. And what we found is, you could almost say that 82% of the buyers in 2020 are people with at least one property, have already bought at least one property in the years before, right? So that tells us that in 2020, it was really an investment. It could be a investor group. These people definitely could be, because their names certainly showed up more than twice, right? More than once, sorry, in the database. So with that said, right, what can we glean from this, right? People that are buying by and large, 82%, that is a lot, which means 18% were the sort of people who were coming, into the market with fresh eyes, first time buyer, all happy, the rest were seasoned buyers. Okay, how seasoned? There's always a scale to these, right? But these are people who have bought more than one, so so probably their line of questioning is very different, right? We can ask ourselves, what would an investor want to know, right? How much return am I going to get if I buy this property? What sort of rental can I get, right? These, I suppose it is very, very specific to the market that you're operating in. If you're selling, shops, if you're selling condominiums, apartments, terrace houses, so on and so forth. What do you think a seasoned investor or a seasoned buyer would be asking? What sort of questions will they be asking, right? So these are the sort of insights that we can gather, and then how do we make use of this now, right? So that's where we'll go next. Do we want to go through more questions?
Yep. I think we can go through first. We leave it to 2 at a time, lah.
Okay,
okay.
Right. So we've got a lot of investors in 2020. How is this correlated, with the pricing index, right? This is something that we've done, tracking the asking prices on propertyguru.com.my. And what you can see is asking prices hasn't really changed year on year, okay, in the country, right? Negative 0.034%. It's relatively stable, and in places like Selangor, you're starting to see the asking prices increase slightly. So by and large, right, prices hasn't really changed much. If you look at Johor, 4.92%, 5% difference, right? We can't really say that investors are out because good buying. Yes, I'm sure there is. I'm sure there are properties out there that are selling for less, right? But overall, it isn't that much if we look at the whole of 2020. So, but there was this dip from 2019. So how are we looking at this, right? So from 2020, not much of a change, right? But in terms of asking prices here, right? If we look at this. Now, how do we interpret this information? Maybe you can drop your comments, right? How can we interpret this? How does this relate in the markets that you operate in? I'll share all of this with you, and you can start to look at it. This is a very interesting one because we're actually seeing a lot of supply come in. We're starting to see a lot of listings fall in. So again, the question is, how does this relate to you? We'll come back to this later, and I want to use this little case study to sort of frame the question that I was asking previously, right? You probably hear this a lot. Let me know if you have any good deals. I ask any real estate agent I meet, hey, got any good buys? Let me know. And you'll probably see a lot more of these people now, right? So how can we help these sort of clients? How can we help, because we know in 2020 most buyers were investors, right? How can we help these people make more informed decisions? I want to use Setia Alam, right? The reason why I use Setia Alam is because this is the most transacted area in Malaysia. Year on year, this is the most popular area, and so let's break it down. Let's break it down in Setia Alam, right? How has the pandemic changed prices in the most popular area in Malaysia, in Setia Alam? Let's look at this. If you look at the year 2020, right, our median price is 700,000, right? That has dropped from 2019. But if you look at 2018, right, median price is 638 for the whole of Setia Alam, which means our pandemic year the median price actually went up, but transactions actually were almost half, right? The number of 2018, right? Almost half of 2019 as well, right? So, okay, less transactions, you could argue that, you know, and more investors, that's why the median price kind of shot up, right? The range became a lot smaller. But what about the median rate per square feet? What we see here is we don't see a huge difference, right? 396 to say 2018, this is 416 ringgit per square foot. On the face of it, residential properties in Setia Alam, if you were to look at this in isolation, you would probably say that the pandemic hasn't done a lot to prices. In fact, you know, all things considered, it's actually, you're probably saying that the market's a little bit better, right? Because if we start to equalize this and, you know, start to see this, stretch this out, and double the transactions, you will probably see an increase in the median rate as well. So that kind of tells us that if you look at it, residential in isolation, Setia Alam, median prices hasn't moved. But let's look at the long-term trend, right? So, you know, if you're an investor, you know, you want to convince someone to buy, why is this a good time to buy, right? You know, is the customer going to say, oh, no, I'm just going to wait for the price to drop a little bit more? If you're you're trying to list the property, trying to convince the seller to sell. Now let's talk about the long-term trend, right? You know, what's the 5-year median price in Setia Alam, for example? 753, and the 10-year 673 number of transactions, right? So these are the sort of information that you can use to talk to your client, right? What is the area that you're operating in showing, right? If it's Subang Jaya, you know, how many transactions this year versus the previous year, right? What is the median rate per square feet? What is the median price? Let's break this down further and let's look at terrace houses in isolation, because if we look at Setia Alam, there is a mix between semi-detached, terrace, bungalows, so on and so forth. You've got apartments and whatnot, right, in the residential space. So if we look at terrace houses specifically, it kind of reinforces what we saw in the wider residential space. Median prices didn't really change, right? The median rate per square foot, yes, it moved up marginally. Number of transactions in terrace houses, again, half the amount in 2019. But by and large, it hasn't really changed. In fact, it has gone up slightly, right, since then. So has the pandemic really affected the market? I would say not really, right? So again, now the question is, how are we positioning ourselves in terms of marketing, and how are we positioning ourselves when it comes to convincing our customers to buy, right? The numbers don't lie. Now, this might be true in Setia Alam, right? But it may not necessarily be true in your markets, right? But by and large, when we look at the market, if you're out there trying to talk to your buyers to convince them and say, hey, now is really the time to go, you can actually point to this fact that, you know, if we look at the 3 most popular areas in the Klang Valley, being Klang, Cheras, and Kajang, and very interesting fact, right? It is not your Bangsas, it is not your Damansaras and Bandar Utamas that are the most popular. It's actually your Klang, Cheras, and Kajang areas, right? The growth areas are the most popular areas in Malaysia year on year. Now, when we talk about median price across, you know, this, it is, you're seeing an increase across the board. Not just Setia Alam in Klang, you're seeing in Cheras and in Kajang, you're seeing prices move up in 2020 from 2019, right? Yes, transaction volume is down. That is unsurprising because the bulk of the market in Malaysia, right, typically more than 50%, I dare say almost 60% of the property market is made up of first-time buyers. Now, if we have 82% of the market being investors, it means a very big chunk of those first-time buyers are not active in the market this year in 2020. right? So that's why you're starting to see these huge drops in the number of transactions because the market has become smaller. But what we're seeing is these people are buying more expensive properties, right? If we look at Johor and we look at Penang, in the three most popular areas in both of these states, again, you don't see very, very big changes. You see very big falls in volume, except Penang. Penang shows very, very small drops, right? Bukit Mertajam only a 15% drop in transactions. That means to say you've got a lot of investors in BM, right? With only a 15% drop in transaction volume and no change in your median price. So again, the question I keep asking is, how are you positioning yourself to your customers? How are you positioning yourself to your buyers, to your sellers, right? In terms of convincing them to buy. Another thing to just reinforce that point is what we've been talking about, since before. It is not all areas are investor magnets, right? If we look at Cheras, the number of investors in Cheras actually fell in 2020, whereas in Klang 21% up and Kajang 15% up. So it really, again, depends. It reinforces the point that you got to understand your local market. You got to understand the areas that you're selling, right? Different places attract a different demographic. There is no one size fit all when it comes to property, right? There's so many facets that influence a property buying decision, right? It really is a matter of understanding, and the best way to understand is from the data, right? Data allows you to become an expert in the market. There are the nuances to understand in a local market as well, but it does immediately give you an idea of who would be most interested in these areas, right? So if I were to immediately point Klang to you, now you would say, wow, you know what? A lot of investors in Klang people like to buy more properties in Klang, right? Or another question you might want to ask yourself is, why are investors buying in Klang? What is drawing people to invest in Klang? What parallels, what similarities can you draw to the markets that you operate in, right? If your market has those similarities to Klang, then are you able to sort of see similar numbers? How can you position, right? We talk a lot about advertising and marketing and work. So these are the sort of things that really come in, right? We just as a point of sharing, we've been some of the work that we do from a data perspective is with banks, where we help banks target customers using this same information that I'm sharing with you today. We help the bank to target these people and say, because for banks, right, we all know today that the banks have tightened their lending criteria, right? It's a lot harder to get a loan today. So they are a little bit selective, and so, but banks still need to make money, and they are making money, right? They announce, their profits and all that sort of thing. Doesn't pandemic, no pandemic, these guys still make money. But how we help them? So that's the question, right? How do we help them? How have we been helping them through this pandemic? What we do is we help the banks figure out, okay, which areas, if we take Klang Valley, for example, have seen the highest growth in equity over the last 10 years, for example. Why 10 years? Why not 3? Why not 5? Because of the lock-in period. Because if why do they want to see property prices in an area go up? It's because then you would have built up equity in your home. If you bought the property for 500,000, today it's worth 1 million. You've been paying your loan on 500,000. That other 500,000 just came like that, just for you holding your property. Yes, it's inflation and all that sort of thing. Correct. But that's money that you can unlock. And so what banks can do today, and what they are doing today, is they're targeting those people. They're targeting those people and they're going to them and saying, hey, you can refinance this property. Okay, if you refinance before 5 years, depending on the loan, you got penalty, right? So after 5 years. So refinance your property, take some of that money out and go buy more property, right? That's a lot. If you notice, that's what a lot of the bank messages have been this year. And well, we've also been guilty of promoting that lah. So we tell them, hey, go and do this, and they say yes. But so if banks are doing that, right, they are then taking the front foot. They're trying to convince someone who's probably sitting at home, MCO, they start sending these messages out. You're right. They send digital marketing. They send all these messages out, content marketing, refinance your home. Do you know your home has gone up in value? All these sort of messages, right? All this is based on the data that we have, right? Then you go after them. And then so the customer will try. The customer will, let's test the water. Wow, I can unlock X amount. Can I go and buy something? Right? So the question is, how, as real estate agents, you can also do the same, right? If the areas in which you operate in, based on the data, you can see that. Now, one thing to just make clear, as agents, we should never try and play the role of a valuer. Right? I think that's always very, very important. We're not here to give valuation advice. We're not here to say, the property is worth X amount. It's not a value. But based on the data, you can sort of get an indication of where prices have gone, right? You can, within a certain degree of confidence, say that prices have gone up by X amount, right? And you can start to drop these sort of pointers into your customers. Say, hey, you potentially are sitting on a lot of extra equity that you could use to buy something else. Maybe the prices have gone down in that particular area. Now's a good time to buy, right? So I started this topic asking, how do we use data, right? When I go and analyze and say investors there are more investors in the market, there are less first-time buyers, it really then boils down to the application of it. What are you going to make, how are you going to use this information to your advantage? So I've just shared with you how a bank would use it, right? Just a little bit more information about breaking down property preferences and all that. I won't go through this in detail, but I'll leave the slide here for you to look at, right? But another thing that I want to talk about is, I'm not trying to upsell. My purpose today was to really have this engaging session. But another way to look at data, not just in asking, figuring out who's buying, what they're buying, where they're buying, is who's actually interacting with your listings, right? This is also data, okay? When should you be posting your listings? When do you think you'll be getting the most, right? So this is where listing performance comes in, right? So these are the sort of things that you should be using, right? What sort of message are you putting in your ads, right? Whenever we run, coming back to the earlier topic, talking about training our model, right? As part of that training, we do a lot of A/B testing. So what's A/B testing, right? A/B testing is we create two scenarios, right? And we test the likelihood of both scenarios, right? Now it could be in terms of an ad. We post an ad and we see which ad receives the most attention, right? So which one performs better? That's an A/B test. That's the sort of thing that you can do, right? There's no silver bullet to say this is the answer. There are certain things that, certain rules of thumb and certain insights that people have gained over the years. But, when it comes to your individual listings and whatnot, these are the sort of things that you want to do. Test out, right? What performs better? What wordings? What photographs, right? If you've got a generic way of writing your ad, test it out, right? Test something new, change it out. What words capture, right? So this is the sort of thing. Before I go further, maybe I just realized that there are a few questions. Maybe we can jump into some of them.
All right. I'll read them out for you.
Can.
Okay. Wow, you got quite a few. Okay, we'll do two again, lah. Okay.
All right.
So Dear Joe, was wondering if you have the data for commercial and industrial during this period.
We do. We do have data on commercial and industrial. So maybe I can ask another question is, what sort of data are you looking, or what sort of insights you're looking to glean from this? Maybe you can share, and then we can unpack that further.
Okay, one-click property, maybe you can be more specific with your question. Okay, I asked another question from Mr. Chia. Dear Joe, what's your comment on the future developments? And do you believe data can one day take the place of agents? Your personal and frank take, please.
We get this question a lot, and not just from agents, developers as well, right? I'll tell you a very funny story, right? Developers will sometimes say, hey, if you control the data, you control what people will think. So technically, you can control what people will buy. That's not a wrong comment in that sense, right? It's almost the way Facebook works, right? A lot of messages on social media, not just on Facebook, WhatsApp. If you get a lot of one particular type of message, you could possibly lean towards that way of thinking as well, right? Now, but if we take that example, right, for you to lean towards one school of thought, you need to be able to trust the person that is providing you that information, right? And that's why influencer marketing and all of that sort of thing becomes really, really important, right? Because influencers, you relate, you trust the person talking, right? Okay, maybe you don't necessarily trust 100%, but you like the way the person talks, you like the way the person lives his or her life, the way this person thinks, etc. If we take that in the point of in the context of real estate, right? You will find that influencer marketing, right, becomes more important in higher ticket items, right? Or more emotionally driven products. And so if we look at that, right, real estate agents would probably be those influencers, right? Because it is such a big ticket item, there is a lot of emotion. I share you the story about how my wife went in there and then straight away, like, I can imagine my child growing up here. That emotional connection, right, to a property, to a home, and that's the role a real estate agent can play, right, to sort of build that up. Well, you could work both ways. You can build it up, or you could totally destroy it. But I think the role of the real estate agent will have to shift, right? I do not believe that it will be taken away. I do not believe that it will be replaced by technology purely because of that emotional need for humans when we look for property. But I do see a shift in agents becoming better consultants, right? Playing a more consultative role in the buying process, right? I do really see a shift in real estate agents merely just listing and pushing property as a product, to them becoming the product, to you as an agent becoming that product, right? So, how you will probably get to a point, and we've already seen this, right? That, I think a lot of more developed economies like in the US or in Australia and all that's a real good template to follow, right? Where real estate agents really act as that consultant to say, hey, I'll give you another example. I very recently, I've been on the lookout. I always try and look for good buying. A bit of history: when I was in Australia, I was really taken by the whole idea of fixing up property. So I used to buy absolute dumps, in the beginning, no money. I go and repair the pipe myself. The pipe bocho lagi, then in the end cost me more money. But that was how I started. And so in Malaysia, I tried to do the same thing. And very recently, I went to see a property, renovated halfway, and then stopped. And so I went to look, I brought my contractor along, and I asked my contractor to look around, so as we were walking around, I was getting a sense for how much things would cost. So I then turned around and asked the agent, and this was an area that I was not very familiar with. It's not an area that I lived in, but I had the data, I had a lot of transactions there. So I turned and asked the agent, hey, Mr. Agent, if I complete this property, I finish up the renovation, because now got no toilet, got no kitchen, got nothing. I finish up all of this. I finish up the extension. How much do you think I can sell the property for? Now, the answer that I got from the agent was, don't know, depending on the market. Okay. Yeah. So you sell a lot of properties in this area? Yes, I sell a lot of properties in this area. It's a true story. So, and I'll tell you where I'm getting it. Yeah, I sell a lot. So I then asked him, hey, this property sold for 800,000 just 6 months ago on the next street. What was the condition like? Oh, it's sold. Oh, I don't know. Oh, okay, never mind. What about this other transaction? What this other transaction, right? And so he's like, oh, I don't know. I don't know about that transaction. And so to me, right, I felt that was a had the agent been aware of these transactions, and as these transactions happen, right, really understand, oh, that was the condition when it sold, right? That was the condition when it sold. And then as I was looking, you don't have to commit to a number, right, and say this property is going to sell for 850,000. No, but I say, look, let the customer make his or her mind up, right? Say, well, yeah, that one sold for 800,000, but the kitchen was very nice, the whatever. And for me as a buyer, that would have allowed me to make an educated decision, right? Whether to buy or not. I have more confidence in buying, especially in an area that I'm not as familiar with, because the data is just data, right? There is a lot of things that go on. The fella mark up the price or not, so you don't know, right? These things do happen, right? The renovation was really good, but you cannot see inside. And that's where you really need a real estate agent who knows that market, who knows what's really going on, to say, hey, Joe, okay, once you finish off, roughly, it's going to be within this amount to this amount, right? These are all very data-driven discussions with that personal experience and touch, right? I think, if as agents, if we can get to that stage, that's probably where the market is. That's what we see, in places like Australia and the US, agents taking on a more consultative approach.
Yep, thanks very much, Joe. We'll let you continue. Just some requests from the guests over here. Believe maybe your WhatsApp quite popular. Your there's a ting 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 constant sound from your side.
Oh shoot.
Yeah. So yeah, just notifying you lah. Thanks. Let you go ahead.
Okay, got it. Give me a sec. Right? Okay, so listings quality score, so these are just reinforcing about your own personal from your perspective lah, right? About how you can use data to your advantage, right? What are listings and all that. So it's not just about what's happening in the market. Data can be how you are communicating. One of the things that we try and track, still trying. I'll be honest, not everything we try to track jadi one. Some things fail and then we have to start again. One of the things is this, right? We want to figure out how people, what messages work, at which point will it be less clickbaity and whatnot. So when you WhatsApp your customers, you WhatsApp info, you forward, to keep track of what you're forwarding. how you're forwarding, which one receives the most interactions, right? Today with WhatsApp for Business, we are able to quantify these things a lot better. For us as a business, when we send messages out, I'm sure the PropertyGuru Malaysia team will send you guys messages as well. We try and track which messages resonate well with you. Long message, do people respond or not? Short message, do they respond or not? What words work? And it's very important, not just, as businesses, as corporates, we do that. But as individuals, as agents, there's no reason why you shouldn't do that as well, because that is data, right? So really, if I were to sum up data in the context of real estate agents, it is everything that you are doing, right? It is sorry, my hair very long, MCO cannot cut hair, so I have to wear a cap. But it is really about everything that you're doing. What are you getting responses from? What's working, what's not working? Quantify that, right? And that builds credibility, right? That builds trust. That allows you to be an expert in an area, right, that you're selling in. But more importantly, that also helps you operate a lot more efficiently. If you're spending money on ads, I know the party line is to ask you to buy more credits, but really it's also very important that we provide value to you, right? So, which also then means like what do I, as an agent, need to do to make sure my ads are more efficient, are reaching more people? How can I improve that week on week, day on day, month on month, right? Am I writing messages to those of you that use digital marketing, right, and content marketing? Are you reaching the right buyer profile? Are you what tools are you using to figure this out, right? One of the things that very recently, just to share one last example, is I asked my marketing side, right, how come the English in the ad is so disjointed? And I can't remember the word. It was something about, they threw in all of these buzzwords and keywords in there, and they were like, Joe, no, I know it's terrible, it sounds so disjointed, but that ad, right, in the way that it's structured, outperforms every other ad 10 times. So it's very important for you to try this, like, and it was I remember it was a refinancing campaign. Even the bank who was our client said, hey, you go and grammar check the thing or not? And we say, our marketing is like, it doesn't matter. That works. That message works. I can put a really nice sounding message together. But when we run the numbers, we realize the one that has the disjointed message but has the right buzzwords in the right places outperforms everything else 10 to 1. So I'm not saying that you should go and put very disjointed ads. What I'm saying is you need to understand what works and what doesn't, right? And that's how you're going to be able to operate a lot more efficiently. So in summary, data it's all about trust, right? It's all about building that customer trust. It's all about, being that trusted consultant. So, that's pretty much all I have today. Maybe we can go to try and work through all your questions. I hope that I've made this as interactive as possible. So let's try and keep the interaction going.
All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you got any questions for Mr. Joe, please note it down here. We will have a quick 10-minute sessions to run through questions. Okay, let me just check for you. Okay, Mr. Zainal again, popular with asking his questions. I see a shift in rental market as Speed Homes has disrupted the market. In fact, Mr. Zainal, I also know they have gone to from 7 figures to 8 figures already in transaction. So yeah, Mr. Joe, what do you think about this big yellow friend of ours?
I don't really have a comment on them. Shouldn't comment also lah. Don't lah.
Too sensitive,
Yeah.
okay, maybe I just make a short comment to my colleagues. Of course, I think in any industry, if you don't look to upskill, normally automation will replace lah. As I mentioned, bank tellers no more. More popularly in our industry, telemarketers will be gone very shortly already. There's so many good AI bots that can telemarket better than agents. Okay, then I move on to the next question is actually from One Click Property. I think now he rephrased his question a little bit better. Patrick from Esprit actually, his One Click Property is his team name. Would like to know the data for commercial and industrial property transaction during this period to grasp when these clients are buying or their buying behavior. Also because I believe home buyer behavior and commercial buyers are different. Yeah.
To be honest, we haven't really run an analysis on the industrial and commercial. What I can say is that we will be putting something out very soon. So I don't have an answer for you. Let me analyze this. But what I can say is do look out for because I know the team is our PR team is looking at this now. We do actually get a lot of feedback from the market. People write in and say, hey, why you never talk about industrial and commercial? So Patrick, you're not the only one. So we hear you and we will be looking at this very, very soon. So in the next few weeks, we will look to release something on how the market is tracking on the commercial and industrial space.
Okay, thank you. Okay, on Patrick again, on the very top, he did share a personal hypothesis. I'll read it out for you. I think you might have a comment. Usually year end with bonus and a year of planning. Year end is a time to purchase, especially for residential. Chinese New Year will decrease because entrepreneurs tend to pay off creditors, staff bonuses, and higher home expenses during this period. After Chinese New Year, it gradually increased and peak June, July again. This is of course not taking into consideration these 2 years COVID. So what do you think about this general hypothesis?
I agree with you on the trend. The peak is usually in June, July. That's when we see the most transactions. So the middle is where you see a lot of transactions. The Q4 and Q1 is typically the lowest periods. On that, I agree. What was very interesting is, another thing that we track is interactions for valuations and all that sort of thing, right? We actually saw Q1 of 2020 was actually higher than Q1 of 2019, right? Which kind of indicates that the market was already on an uptrend from 2019 to 2020. So that was one number, because and that ties in very, very closely with loan application rates, right? So if we benchmark that against Bank Negara's numbers, that kind of corroborates. So Q4, Q1 lowest periods, but in 2020 Q4, Q1 was higher than Q1, Q4 in 2019. The number in 2021, unfortunately, slightly sketchy. That's why we haven't quite, we realized that there has been a significant delay where we would typically have a very, I know NAPIC released their numbers already. We have released some numbers, but we realized that there has been a delay in what the government has been able to churn out in terms of reporting. So we still do not believe we have a very, very accurate view of Q4 and Q1 so far.
Okay. Okay, then which leads me when you talk about this data collection, this is my personal question. So I think agents really struggle to follow up with market trend because some of the data that is actually available to the agents, for example, bricks, is always like 6 months delayed. So very hard to give perspective to owners also. So is there better platforms or places to or any recommendations, or is that a sensitive question? I don't know.
I mean, it is 6 months behind because of stamping and how long it takes before you sign, then you got the whole preparing SPA, loan disbursement, loan approval, loan disbursement, and all that, and then that typically takes anywhere between 3 to 4 months, and usually that is the gap, because the moment that you stamp the agreement, the very next month, JPPH will already pick up the data. So it's really the gap is between the stamping, right? So that's where you've got your 6 months sort of gap, right? Or anywhere between 3 and 6 months gap. Unfortunately, that is the reality. Even for us, that is something that we face, because that is the most credible source of data that we can rely on. But having said that, right? Having said that, property prices are exceptionally lumpy, right? Property as an asset is a very lumpy thing. Transactions take a long time, which also means that you won't see massive fluctuations month on month. You won't see a 10% rise this month and a 10%. It is not Bitcoin. Property is not Bitcoin, right? Because the negotiation process takes time. But then the question would be like, what about rising market, falling market, right? So the question of being 3 to 6 months behind only becomes a real problem when the market is rising rapidly or the market is falling rapidly. And for us to answer that, and there's never going to be, if you ask, how would data analysts track that? They will then look at trends. So the only way you can see, you can sort of put a finger on this is to sort of look at the past trends, right? Are we seeing this sharp incline or sharp decline, right? Yep. Then you have to make that call. Obviously, maybe speak to a valuer, but in terms of those sort of increases.
All right, great stuff. Okay, since not many questions, I will leave the last question also. Not sure whether you have the experience for this, but in comparison to other markets, since that you were touching a little bit on elasticity, actually, I think the key term is elasticity. Compared to the other ASEAN regions, how are we like in terms of this elasticity? Not very, I assume.
Elasticity in what sense?
Yeah, like you say, the prices, it doesn't go up, doesn't go down that fast like Bitcoin, so less elastic. Plus, I think Bank Negara's control is quite strong as well.
Yep. We are not, because we don't have the level of transparency as some of the other economies, right? So from what we see in, say, Singapore, deals get done a lot quicker. We don't, or in Australia, right? You don't have that 3-4 months to close a deal. Waiting for disbursement. You can close a deal within 3 to 4 weeks. And if you have that sort of thing, it means it's stamped, done, data made available. And in a lot of these economies, the data is also made available, right? Then people can start to make very, very quick decisions. Then you start to see that sort of markets move a lot freely, a lot faster. You will start to see prices change a lot quicker. Because if you look at Singapore and Australia right now, right? Let's look at these two these two countries, right? Singapore is going through a rapid boom right now. There's been a lot of pent-up demand. Demand is off the charts. People are paying above market prices, right? And if you look at Australia, it is the same, right? A lot of pent-up demand, people are rushing in. And when you've got economies where it is running that efficiently, where within 3 to 4 weeks, you're able to see, wow, that was what prices were 4 weeks ago, then you will start to see people going, okay, if that went for 500,000, then let's go 10% up, 550,000. Let's test. Where do we come out at? Maybe 525,000, right? But people are able to make those sort of judgment calls, as opposed to Malaysia, where it takes about 6 months before you see that. So what you'll find is in Malaysia, you'll have a more stable market. You won't see the high highs. You won't see massive low lows.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, guys, I think most of your questions are already answered by Mr. Joe. Before Mr. Joe leaves us today, please give him a warm round of applause again. And please give in some of your reactions. So, Mr. Joe, thank you very much for sharing at least 1.5 hours of yours. We really appreciate you making your time over here. Hopefully everyone on this platform, similarly, we work in a small industry. Let's be collaborative, supportive, and let's all stick in together in solidarity, our team. So hashtag for our training, Solidarity 2021. Okay, so please do scan and drop a feedback. Mr. Joe, thank you so much for your time. We will see you very shortly.